interview skills for the COVID-19 period and beyond with Jeanne Nelson of PROWESS Workshops and Lyn Leis, professional career coach. Whether you're just starting to think about a job search or you've been looking for a while and hope to be interviewing soon, Jeanne and Lyn are here to give you some expert guidance on acing interviews in this COVID-19 socially distant environment and after. Before I officially introduce the two of them and turn things over, we do have a couple of announcements to make here. First, I want to thank my co-chair for professional development, Krishna Horrigan, who works with me to bring you these timely and relevant professional development programs for the Westchester Library community. I would also like to thank our executive board, President Giovanna Fiorini Iannacci, Vice President Kim Stucco, both of them are here today, Secretary Joanna Rooney, and Treasurer Allison Robbins, as well as the rest of the WLA board members whose hard work and support make these programs possible. After today's presentation, each of you will be sent a PDF continuing education certificate where there'll be a space for you to fill in your name and keep that for your professional records. We're also going to send along with that a little program evaluation for today. So if you could please fill that out at your earliest convenience, we would appreciate it. The Professional Development Committee would also like to encourage all of you to apply for our annual Professional Development Awards. Every year, Westchester Library Association awards 2 $500 financial aid awards to members to pursue professional development activities, such as taking a course or attending a conference. For example, if you plan to attend NILA or you hope to take an online course through an organization like ALA, these awards can help cover the expenses associated with those pursuits. The awards are available to librarians, clerks, and library assistants alike, as long as you're a member of Westchester Library Association. We're now accepting applications for those awards, and you can find a link to applications as well as the application instructions on the WLA website, and we'll put it in the chat here in a moment as well. The application deadline is April 16th, 2021. So that's actually coming up in just about 6 weeks here, and recipients will be announced at our annual conference in May. As we get started, we'd like you to remain on mute unless you're planning to ask a question. You can also ask a question via the chat, which Krishna and I will monitor and bring to Jeanne and Lyn's attention at a convenient time. And there will also be ample time at the end of the presentation to open things up to wider questions as well. So now I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to today's presenters. Jeanne Nelson, creator and instructor of the PROWESS Workshops, a selection of interactive training sessions on topics of business etiquette and interview and workplace savvy that she offers to students and professionals at local colleges and community organizations and to private clients. And Lyn Leis, a career coach with 13 years of experience working with college students, recent graduates, and experienced professionals. Lyn is currently an associate director of career and professional development at Mercy College and a career coach in private practice. Without further ado, welcome Jeannie and Lyn.
Hello, and welcome WLA members. We all know that the library is the pillar of the community, and library professionals are the people who hold up those pillars. We also know that libraries are the original information superhighway. And so Lyn and I are very pleased to be here today to offer you some information on interviewing during this very challenging pandemic. So without further ado, we will start. What we'd like to do today is make sure that you stand out in an interview. And I'd like you to just take a little look at that figure that we have up there for a moment, because we're going to talk more about that a little bit later. Interviewing has a lot of moving parts. And although you may know a lot of this, the information we're going to cover today, it's always helpful to have somebody help you to connect all of those parts so that you can have a successful plan for interviewing. So today we are going to cover the interview basics, basic skills that you can apply to any kind of interviewing. And then we're going to zero in on the virtual interview, which has become front and center during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then, as Megan mentioned, we will have time for Q&A. So interview basics. a little over a decade ago, when I was in the corporate sector working for a Fortune 500 Fortune 500 Wall Street firm, financial services firm, I was supervising a lot of student interns, and I realized immediately that they needed assistance in navigating the corporation successfully. So I created a series of workshops for them to be able to navigate. And actually, I'm in touch with some of them today, all these years later, and they have successful careers. And they attribute a lot of it to the training that they got on these workshops. So when I established them for the community in 2008, I adopted the slogan, "A degree will get your foot in the door, your soft skills will open it." Originally, I had said good manners will open it, but then the phrase soft skills came into being. We've always known about soft skills, but it didn't have a name until a few decades ago. What are those soft skills? Soft skills are non-technical skills, and up on the screen are some of the soft skills that employers are looking for today. These are the top soft skills that they want to see. Take a look at them. Take a second or two and take a look at these soft skills that employers are looking for and assess whether you have them and to what degree you are skilled at implementing them. And I would like to just point out too, the ability to adapt and the ability to recover. Now, as we know, we have had to adapt to an awful lot of things this past year. And we've had to recover from a lot of glitches that have been involved in all of these changes. So resilience and the ability to adapt are very important, as well as all of these other ones. Soft skills are also business etiquette skills. The ability to make smooth and correct introductions, to have pristine table manners. Some employers actually take their candidates out to lunch. If they have a lot of finalists for a very important position, and that could include an entry-level position in some industries, they will take them out to lunch to eliminate the candidates so that they can have the last one standing. Now, this is interesting because I like to compare success in an interview to the Olympics. Sometimes the Olympian who gets the gold medal is not the best one, but he's the one who didn't make a mistake. So one of the things that we want to make sure is that we connect all these moving parts and we avoid making mistakes. So business skills. Business etiquette skills, introductions, table manners, the ability to organize, to be inclusive, to work in diversified workplaces, to show respect for people, and to have tact. Quote, most hiring and firing decisions come down to soft skills. That's from a 2019 Global Talent Trends report from LinkedIn. It's a direct report from the employers that they interviewed. So the power of soft skills from that same report, 80% of employers say soft skills are increasingly important to company success. Obviously, you have to have the technical skills in order to land that job that you want, but you have to have the soft skills to be able to sell them, to be able to implement them. Almost 90% of employers surveyed say bad skills or bad hires typically lack soft skills. And more than 90% surveyed say that soft skills matter as much or more than hard skills. So how do employers assess the soft skills in their candidates? Well, they will ask behavioral and situational questions. And how do you answer those? How do you prepare for that? You can use what are called the STAR and SOAR stories. You probably have heard these acronyms. STAR is situation, task, action, result. Now that means that the employer, the interviewer, will present you with a situation, or they will ask you, tell me about a time that such and such happened, fill in the blank. You will respond by telling them a story about a situation that you had, a task that you had to accomplish, the action you took to accomplish that task, and the result. And of course, the result is always going to be successful. You don't want to tell stories about your failures. You want to have a few of these stories so that you can answer this question. Now, the situation, obstacle, action, result story is a little bit different because that has a problem in it that has to be solved. So you have the situation, you have the problem you had to solve, you tell them the action that you took to remove that obstacle and the result. So those you should have prepared, and those are perfect to answer these questions. The other way they assess you is reading your body language, which we'll get into, but you want to make sure that your posture is good. You're standing up straight, your shoulders are squared, your chin is up, because you look smarter, you look more interested and interesting and more attentive. And people are going to gravitate to you more naturally. You want to avoid fidgeting. No hair twirling, no tossing your hair back constantly, no fidgeting with your fingers or snapping that ballpoint pen, no crossing your legs and shaking your foot. All of those things are distracting, and they take away from your professional image. Facial expressions are obviously very important. You don't want to frown. You don't want to look confused or bewildered, and you don't want to look judgmental or distrustful. So you want to be sure that your facial expressions are positive and uplifting. Now, projects and assessments, depending on the position to which you are applying, the interviewer might ask you to solve a problem that it directly applies to the position to which you're applying. So they may usher you into the conference room and, for example, say, our organization is planning this major special event, and we want you to plan out the marketing plan. So they might give you 45 minutes or so, and you're to come up with a marketing plan based on the information that they've given you. So that's an example of some problem-solving projects that you might be handed. The other thing that some employers, not all, but some like to do is to provide you with a personality assessment. Myers-Briggs is probably the most well-known one, but there are many others, and they will try to assess whether your personality is matched to a certain job, the one that you're applying to. So these are some of the things that you want to think about. Preparation is the key to building confidence and reducing stress. Going into an interview can be stressful, and there can be some fear involved. So you want to overcome that fear and reduce the stress. And the way you do that is you prepare. And if there is any group on earth who knows how to prepare, how to research, how to get the information that they need, it is the library professional. So this is right up your alley and in your wheelhouse. So get ready. Thoroughly assess your fit for a particular position going in. How do you do that? You get the job description, and you look not only at the hard skills that are needed, because you already have those most likely. You want to look at the soft skills that are needed to perform that job and decide which ones you have and which ones you have strength in and which ones you need to improve. This prepares you to discuss, when you go in, your match for the job. Now, you also want to prepare for a more involved interview process. Employers today are looking to hire people who are going to stay for a long time. You might remember that survey that was done a number of years ago that estimated that the average person was going to change jobs 5 times during the life of their careers. So they don't want that. They don't want that to happen. So they want to make sure that they are hiring the right person. They're investing a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money in training and in professional development. And they want that employee, that candidate, to be with their organization for a very long time. So there might be a few more hoops to jump through than we used to be able to in a simpler time. And also, part of getting ready is practice using and talking about your soft skills. And again, you go back to those STAR and SOAR stories, and you have those under your belt, and you practice using your soft skills, not only in your professional life, but in your personal life. Really nail them down. Research, again, this is right up in your wheelhouse. But let's look at the checklist. If you're going to be interviewing in your industry, you know your industry, but you must be sure that you're up to date with everything that's going on in your industry. You don't want to walk into an interview and find out that something really major happened in your industry. That morning, a big announcement was made and you don't know about it. That's not going to impress the hiring manager or the interviewer. So you want to make sure that you are up to date. If you're changing industries, and for example, a library professional does have transferable skills. There are a lot of industries that can use your particular talents. So you might think, well, I'm going to try another industry. Make sure that you have researched that industry thoroughly, that it's the right fit for you, and that you know a lot about it. Same with the company or organization, the department, the position. This goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. You also want to see if you can find out who the manager of the area to which you are applying is. Find out as much as you can. That might be the person who's interviewing you, or it might be someone else. So try to find out who your interviewer is going to be, if possible. Now, you can find out a lot of these things through your professional organizations, through your networks, through word of mouth, your coworkers. You know, there's a lot of areas that you can research to find out these answers. You want to also research the types of questions that you might be asked by the interviewer and be prepared to answer them. You also want to prepare a set of questions that you will ask. A really good interview is a conversation between two or more people, usually one-on-one, two people. Although there are other kinds of interviews, which we're not going to be covering today, but the skills that we're talking about can be applied to any of them. But you want to have at least 3 questions. And you know, this is for 2 reasons. You want to find out information about the position. You want to find out, is this really going to be a fit for me? And you want to know as much about it going into the job if you are hired. But the second reason is, of course, to impress the interviewer with your interest and your knowledge of the job and the company. Now, you've also heard the expression, it takes only 7 seconds to make an impression on someone. So the person who's interviewing you may never have met you, but they've seen your resume, which is part of the reason why you've got the interview. But now they're going to meet you. And that's the other part of the equation. They want to know if you are going to be a fit with your soft skills for this job. Are you going to be able to get along with other people? If it's a managerial position, are you a people person? Are you going to be able to do a little coaching? You know, what kind of a person are you? Are you polished? Do you know the right things to do? Can you work with people inside and outside the organization? So the first thing is you have to decide, what are you going to wear to the interview? Now, most of the time, you should be wearing something formal, even if it's a dress down industry, because in doing so, you are showing the interviewer that you have respect for the interviewer's time, you have respect for the organization and the position, and that you know the right thing to do. If it's definitely a very informal industry, then you can dress business casual as long as you've checked first to find out that that would be okay. And business casual doesn't mean jeans and a t-shirt. That's what you might wear if you're going into a tech company, and that's what you wear on the job, but that's not what you wear to an interview. And dress down does not mean dress sloppy. It means that you're not quite as formal as, you know, the suit and the tie, but you want to look put together. You want to have everything look like it's coordinated. It doesn't have to be formal, but it has to be coordinated. So the most formal wear that a man should be wearing is the suit that you see in this photograph. Either dark charcoal or navy is good. Black is usually not recommended for men, but a dark charcoal or a navy, either a solid or a patterned in a herringbone or a pinstripe, a neutral tie and a white shirt, and spit polished shoes, usually in black. And also, one thing about men's socks, they should match the pants and not the shoes. Because sometimes if you wear the same color sock as the shoe, it looks like you're wearing a boot. So it should match the pants. And that just makes you look put together. The most formal attire for a woman would be the skirt suit. Now, I know I was one of the people back in the 70s who came to work in the pantsuit. I was one of the first. And it was quite a battle. So pantsuits are fine, but today, even more formal than the pantsuit is the skirt suit, which is pencil skirt and a well-fitted, well-cut jacket with a silky blouse or a white shirt, and shoes that are relatively neutral. Now, this is the kind of shoe I like to wear on the job. As you can see, it's red, which is my signature color. It's got a pointy toe and it's got a pretty high heel. This is what I would wear to an interview. I would wear something with a shorter, chunkier heel in black, probably patent or at least a nice, highly polished black. You can also wear different kinds of shoes with a dressed down outfit, but again, make sure that outfit is coordinated and always has a jacket, unless a woman is wearing a dress, which is perfectly fine. You can look at a lot of the news programs and see what the anchor people are wearing. It's kind of a clue as to what's a good thing to wear for a professional. Not always, but a lot of the times. Now, grooming is important. So your hair, your makeup, you should be freshly showered. You should be, your breath should be fresh. Everything should be good about it. This is for an in-person interview, obviously, but even for an online interview, practicing all of these things just make you feel confident and professional. So the other thing is with grooming is your nails. Make sure your nails are manicured because people notice these things. People notice everything, but you don't want any one thing to stand out. So you don't want your makeup to be too dramatic. You don't want your hairstyle to be too dramatic. If you like to wear your nails long and maybe with art, you might want to reconsider for the interview. There's a lot of things you can do on the job that you don't really want to do in the interview. So grooming is important to set off the attire. Now, accessories, I would keep very simple. A watch is nice. Maybe some simple earrings, no dangling earrings, not a lot of chunky jewelry, either for men or women. Keep it simple, keep it elegant, and keep it professional. Because the more you do that, the less distracting it is, but your whole persona, the whole package that you're presenting looks really professional and impressive. Personal expression usually refers to tattoos and body piercing. And you should, again, when you're researching the company, the industry, find out if that's acceptable. If it's acceptable, then, consider how you're going to present that. Otherwise, minimize it if you can for the interview. Now, a word about masks, which we were discussing before. We're all wearing masks, to protect ourselves and protect others from COVID-19 and all of its variants. But this is something that might stay with us for a long time. COVID-19 might not be stamped out entirely until maybe early next year, even by the time everyone is vaccinated and we get the herd immunity. But in addition to that, we might continue to wear masks. We're learning a lot of things during COVID-19 that might be carried over into our new normal. There's still cold and flu season. There's still a lot of people who get ill during these seasons. They miss work. Employers hate that. And we certainly don't want people showing up for work when they have these, but the mask can help. I've already started getting my spring collection. I see no reason why we can't look fashionable while we're wearing these, but certainly in a professional environment, when we get back to going out in person, and even now you might go to an interview in person where you must wear a mask because that's the protocol. You want it to look professional. It doesn't have to look like you are a healthcare worker necessarily, because you're not. You want to look like the professional. So the mask should be attractive and coordinate with your outfit if possible. So that's my statement on masks. Okay. Secret weapons for staying in the game. This is so simple, but a lot of people do not practice these things. And here we go. The handshake is on pause. I am convinced it will be back. If you'll remember back in 2009 and 2015, we had two pandemics. They were nothing like the one we're going through now, but one was H1N1 and the other one was Ebola. And people were taking precautions, especially with the Ebola scare. The handshake was on pause and we did alternatives, but it will be back someday because that's just human nature is to have physical contact, and we'll get back there at some point. So, but for now, there are two things we can do. For online interviews, the simple holding up of your hand in a greeting. Hi, is fine, and it's acceptable and it's understandable. So, but you should do something like that in greeting. And in person, and this might carry over even when the formal handshake comes back, is the elbow bump. It's lighthearted, it's friendly, it's safe, and it's very acceptable now. So those are two things that people are doing a lot of. I have been, when I have ventured out with my mask and my hand sanitizer and my hazmat outfit, I have been greeted with an elbow bump. So these are two things that you can do. Eye contact. Eye contact is really essential. Lyn is going to talk about eye contact online in her section, but I just want to point out the importance of eye contact. Eye contact makes you feel to another person friendly, trustworthy, approachable, interested, attentive, all of those things, and they're all positive. We say eyes are the windows to the soul, and they really are. Eye contact is important, not staring to scare somebody by staring too much, but to make that appropriate eye contact. Smile. There is nothing that warms another person as a smile. You can smile at somebody and change their whole day. So smiling says, again, I'm approachable, I'm positive, I'm upbeat, I'm open, and I can get along with people. So an interviewer wants to know that. And remember, the interviewer is probably just as flustered as you might be on their end, because they've probably been interviewing a lot of people. They've been in meetings all day. This is before, you know, we were online all the time. Just in normal pre-COVID environments, people still had busy schedules. So a candidate who walks into the office smiling with eye contact and upbeat and looking professional and really prepared can make an interviewer's day. That alone can just say, oh, what a refreshing turn of events in my day. So keep all these things in mind. A lot of people forget to smile. They forget to make the eye contact. Maybe they're nervous. So remember to do all of these things. Now, before you go, you want to clarify the date and the day. This might seem academic, but how many times have you been given a date and a day that don't match? So you want to make sure that you've got the right date and the right day, you've got the right time, and you have all the special instructions that you need. You want to make sure you've got the right address, the location, and if you've never been there before, you might want to take a dry run. Decide whether you're going to drive, whether you're going to take public transportation. If it's a difficult place to get to, you want to have the directions. And even if you have a good navigation system in your car, you want to get the directions from the employer's office in case there's anything unusual that maybe your GPS doesn't pick up. And then take a dry run if at all possible. Follow the special instructions. Are there any special protocols? Is there a floor you have to go to? Is there an office suite number? All of that information. Do you have to go in the back door, off the draw, off the parking lot, etc. Now, the reason I have some of these in red and some of these in gray is because the ones in red definitely apply to online training interviews as well as the in-person ones. Now, assemble your materials. When you're going in person, you want to take extra copies of things. Even if you've already provided them, you have to be prepared for any occasion. You might walk in there and find out that you're going to be interviewed by several people, by a panel. And maybe everybody doesn't have, maybe they were just called in at the last minute. We need an extra person to come in here and interview this candidate. You want to make sure you've got extra copies for everybody. Again, you're prepared, and this speaks to your viability. So you want to have extra copies of your resume. If you have samples of your work that you want to show, perhaps you wrote something that was published, perhaps you were talked about in an article, you want to bring a copy of that article. Maybe you got letters of commendation or flattering letters from customers. You want to bring all of those, but not anything more than, they say, a half a dozen pieces in a very slim portfolio. And don't offer them, but have them in case you're asked. Again, you're prepared. Have your references available. Don't offer them, but have them there in case with all the contact information. And one important thing about references, make sure you've been in touch with the people who have said you can use them as a reference, to make sure that's still okay, and to make sure that they're expecting a call or an email from an employer saying, could you give this person a reference? It would be very embarrassing if you hadn't been in touch with that person for 5 years and they forgot all about, that they had said that. So make sure you've contacted your references and that you have all their information, and bring business cards. And don't forget to ask the interviewer or any interviewers that might be there for their business cards, because you might have to get in touch with them. The day before your interview, get a good night's sleep. This can't be emphasized enough. I know it's hard. I know that we all say, we're going to get a good night's sleep, and then before you know it, it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you're still up and you're still getting to doing things that you didn't get to during the day. But try to make that work. And then before you go to the interview or you get online for the online interview, have a light meal or snack. There's nothing worse than having a growly stomach in the middle of an interview, or, being distracted yourself because you're hungry, and when we're rushing around these days, we forget to do things like that for ourselves. A couple of things not to do. Be sure to turn your cell phone off or put it on vibrate. The only time you are to bring out your cell phone during an interview is if the interviewer asks you to look up something or asks you for something that you say, well, I'd have to look that up. Is that all right if I do that? Other than that, you are focused on the interviewer only and anybody who might be involved in your interview, and not your cell phone. And obviously no gum chewing. And I love gum chewing, but I only do it in private. I never do it in public. And a lot of people are disturbed by gum smacking and things like that. So you want to keep that in mind. And also, while we're on the topic, although it's not on the screen, be careful about wearing fragrances, because a lot of people are sensitive and you don't want to distract from yourself by perhaps wearing too much perfume or too much aftershave or something that really is irritating to them. So kind of go light or not at all on that. Now, power posing. There's been a study, and I'm going to give you some information about that study. I don't know if you've heard about this, but I became hooked on it. I think it's wonderful. And of course, you should do some stretches, and you should do some physical exercise light before you go into an interview. This just helps you think better. But power posing is a study done by a Harvard professor, which I will tell you about in a minute. And what she discovered is that if you do a Wonder Woman power pose for 2 minutes, seriously, or the power pose where you just won a race for 2 minutes, this raises your testosterone levels, which of course women have as well as men. And that's the confidence, that's the power hormone. And then it lowers your cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So it gives you confidence and reduces your stress. This is great to do a short time before you go into any stressful situation. So if you don't mind, could everybody just stand up for a moment? And because we're sort of in the middle of this presentation now, it's a good idea to just change our positions and either adopt a Wonder Woman power pose, which is fists on the hips and legs apart, head held high, shoulders back, or I've just won the race and I'm the best. I am the best. I am a hero and I am very powerful. Now, you don't have to hold this for 2 minutes now, but when you have a chance, try it out. See if it makes a difference. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the details behind this study, because I think it's very helpful. Anything that makes us feel more powerful is helpful. All right, Professor Amy Cuddy is her name. The search thing was too long to put on here. Just search Amy Cuddy, your body language. Watch her TED Talk. There's 2 versions of it, I believe. One is a truncated version, but the real version, and you should watch the whole thing because the study is fascinating, is 20 minutes. And it could change, a lot of the ways you approach stressful situations, any stressful situation. Okay, leave plenty of your time for yourself before the interview. in traveling and getting there. Plan your transportation and route, as we said. Arrive at the venue 30 minutes early to freshen up, collect yourself, and maybe perform a power pose for 2 minutes in the restroom. You know, in inclement weather, you might have, you know, outerwear that you want to shed, you want to, you know, fix your hair, you know, straighten your suit out. There's a lot of things, and that's going to make you feel more confident going into. You're not rushed or crunched for time. But arrive at the location. So you're going to arrive at the building 30 minutes in advance, and that means walking through the door. So you want to put some time aside for parking or getting off the bus or train or get whatever. But you want to arrive at the actual office, the actual floor, the actual place of the interview only 5 minutes early. Because arriving too early sometimes makes the interviewer, the receptionist, everybody involved a little nervous. And you want to look interested, but you don't want to look desperate. So arrive 5 minutes early. That's it. Now, impressions and connections, some more impressions. Be nice to everyone, everyone. Whether it's online, somebody might come online before you go into your actual interview, in a virtual interview. If you're arriving at a venue, you're going to be running into elevator starters, perhaps, receptionists, other librarians, other staff members, the executive secretary to the hiring manager, a customer, the spouse of the interview who's just leaving the office. You never know. And those people are likely to discuss you after you've left. I worked for a man who, every time he interviewed anybody for any position, and I worked for a number of CEOs, he always asked me, "What did you think of that person? Give me your impressions." So if that person wasn't nice to me, I would let him know. And I'll tell you, he would check that person right off the list. So executive assistants, mail pages, anybody who the interviewer respects can give an opinion of you. So you have to keep in mind, and these are part of the moving parts that are floating around. And because this lends itself to telling them, how are you going to be? All right, greet the interviewer, introduce yourself, connect on an emotional level. Now, you belong to a professional organization, which is great. Professional organizations are wonderful. And it's likely if you're interviewing in the industry, perhaps your interviewer is a member of the Westchester Library Association or another professional organization of which you are a member. That's a connection right there. So you want to find connections, and you want to make sure that you are likable, because when the interviewer is impressed with you and likes you from the get-go, and all of these things that we've talked about will help that happen, then anything you do in the interview is likely to be overlooked. But if he doesn't like you or she doesn't like you, you could be perfect and it might not work. So, you try to do that. These are important things to do, and why the soft skills are so important. Be honest about everything. Don't fudge anything in an interview. Don't give any misinformation about yourself, because 9 times out of 10, it will come back to haunt you. So you don't want to even leave yourself open for that. Even after you've been hired, something could come back that you have misrepresented. But on the other hand, avoid raising unnecessary red flags, meaning don't elaborate too much on answering questions. Just answer the question. Have your stories prepared, and don't go off on a tangent, because you could open a can of worms and you don't want to do that. Use humor, but appropriately. No off-color jokes or salty language, but sometimes, making a witty remark or something if something happens, especially if you want to cover up a mistake that the interviewer did, that he might or she would appreciate that. But use humor lightly. It can endear you to the interviewer. Pay attention to your body language, as we discussed, and smile. Don't forget ever to smile. Now, one of the things that you're not going to do during the interview is negotiate salary and benefits. You're not going to ask questions about how much vacation you get. All of that should be taken care of with HR. But in any case, this is to be discussed after you've been offered the job, because that gives you leverage to negotiate, but not ever, ever during the interview. Okay, after the interview, you want to send an email right away. Now, studies have shown, again, that most people don't do this. Can you imagine? So doing this gives you a competitive edge. Some interviewers or hiring managers won't even consider a candidate who they don't hear from after the interview, because that is really a faux pas. It's just not good business etiquette. So you want to send a quick email and quickly after the interview. You might even have it drafted and then customize it afterwards so you can get it off quickly. And it should have 3 components. So maybe 3 short paragraphs or just a couple of sentences that say, thank you for your time. I appreciate your seeing me. And then the second paragraph should briefly reiterate why you are a good fit for the position. Remind the interviewer. And then the third paragraph, if you can, try to remember something that the interviewer said that impressed you and mention that. Say, I've been thinking about your comment about such and such ever since I left the interview. This helps you connect again with the interviewer even after the interview. Now, most of the time, decisions will be made fairly quickly, but if they drag out, and they can, maybe the person deciding is away for some reason and they can't make a decision until she gets back, or there's a budgetary concern and they put it on hold for a little while. There's a number of reasons why there might be a delay. If you've asked the interviewer before you left for a time frame for the decision and it's dragging out past that, call. You can pick up the phone and call. That shows that you're still interested in the position and you're on top of things. So you can feel free to do that. The snail mail was always a part of things, or usually a part of things prior to COVID. But since COVID, the handwritten note or the short typewritten note following up after the email is first and foremost and essential. If you do follow up, some people are a little bit nervous about getting a lot of snail mail because of germs and because of the pandemic. They want to cut down on that. And also the mail is having a little bit of struggle these days. So it might take a long time or longer than usual to get it. So it's not really essential right now. What's essential is that email. But you can send a note if you want, but only after you've sent the email. Okay, take a look at these. These are deal breakers. We've gone over the positives. Now, just look at the negatives. See if you can connect all of these to what we've just discussed. But failing to do any of these things could be deal breakers. This could be your Olympic coming in for the bronze or the silver instead of the gold, because you overlooked something here. So make sure that this list is complete. Now, you may have heard of Audre Lorde. She is your historical colleague. She's known for many, many things, but she was a librarian in Westchester County in New York City during the 1960s. And she was also a poet. And I didn't know that there was such a thing as the poet librarian, but apparently there is, and there was. And this is one of her quotes, which I just wanted to share with you if you haven't seen it yet. When I dare to be powerful, and we've been talking about being powerful, when I dare to be powerful, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. So if we follow all of these parts and connect all of these pieces, you should have a very, very good plan going into the interview. Are there any questions on this portion of the presentation?
I don't see anything in the chat right now yet.
No chat? Okay. Well, we have another opportunity after the second portion to ask.
I do have a question, and I wonder if it fits better with your portion or with Lyn's.
Okay.
And my question is really about asking questions to the interviewer about company culture, about
yep.
Yeah, where that fits. And
oh, that's what you should be doing. Absolutely. As I mentioned, not only should you be researching the possible questions you'll be asked and be prepared to answer them, but you need to prepare at least 3 questions, 3 good researched questions that you want to ask, because you want to find out as much about the organization and the position as they want to find out about you. So asking about the culture is perfectly okay. Just be sure to phrase it very professionally and not anything confrontational. Make it very academic. But yes.
Sorry, and speaking from my own experience, that question does sometimes come up at the end when the interviewer asks, "Do you have anything for us?" Is it better to wait for that last question, or is it better to pepper the questions in throughout the interview to kind of make it more of like an engagement?
Well, that's for you to decide. You have to see how it's going. What you want to do is organically insert those questions. So if a topic comes up and you're having a conversation about it, if there is a pause, you could say, I have a question about that. I was wondering about that. Just insert it very, very naturally. So you don't have to wait to the very end, because sometimes you might forget to ask the question then, or you don't have the opportunity. But just make sure that you slip it in naturally, like you would in a conversation.
Okay, and we had another question pop up related to that. That kind of end where they ask if you have any questions. Is that an appropriate time to talk about work hours or overtime?
No.
Okay, still hold it for HR.
You hold it for HR, if HR has a meeting with you and they're discussing these things. But the best time to discuss all of that is when you've been offered the job, because you have the leverage. You've already been hired. They're not going to change their minds because you've asked a question. And it's very, very acceptable and normal to negotiate some salary, negotiate your time off, negotiate, a lot of different things outside of what the package is that you've been offered. Because you're going to do your research about the position too. And that research is going to include what the standard pay scale is for that position. So if they're offering you something that's lower than that, or that's less than you think you're worth, you're going to negotiate, and that's expected. And it's also expected that you would ask questions then about the benefits.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Oh, yeah, another question. How many people is the norm now for Zoom interviews?
Oh, I am going to let Lyn take that question, because she is the expert on the online interview.
Perfect.
Absolutely. That depends so much on the industry and the organization. I have seen larger group interviews, definitely, because it's easier, and we'll talk about this in a minute, it's easier to connect all of the people who want to interview you at once. So we're seeing both larger panel interviews and also more rounds of interviewing. So if they can't get everybody together in one time, you might find yourself with a few blocks of time back to back talking to 3 different people in rapid succession. So there isn't an average number I could give you, but I would prepare for something like 3 to 5 interviewers to be on with you or to be interviewing you in succession. You might just see the one, but I would prepare for a larger group, especially in nonprofit. I don't know if this is the library case, but I find in my nonprofit spaces that we interview and hire by committee. So we're preparing for that even more online. I thought really quickly, if there wasn't another question, I would just follow up with you, Krishna, briefly and see if there was something more specific you were asking about what to ask in terms of things like company culture, or if you were just looking for, is that appropriate to?
Yeah, I was looking more for like the timing more so than the actual content. And then I guess in terms of what's inappropriate, that's valuable to know. But then I assume everything else would be really dependent on your background research and yes, really the flow of the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, you're going to find out through your research an awful lot about the company, the position, the person, people.
Yeah. With that said, Lyn, if you have
that should be available to you.
Sorry, with that said, Lyn, if you have any suggestions for good questions to bring up, or at least topics, then that is always welcome.
And that, I mean, that could be and is for us an entire separate conversation. But the reason I picked up on it is one thing I do just want to pitch in is right now, unsurprisingly, candidates and companies are having much deeper conversations about equity and authenticity at work. And one of the things I think candidates aren't always prepared to ask about is that culture and what that looks like. So just my suggestion is, and of course that could be a whole other conversation if we wanted to have it, but my suggestion is to be really specific. It's one thing to walk in and say, can you tell me about the culture here and how you integrate diversity and inclusion? It's another thing to say, can you tell me about one current equity initiative that you're really excited about in your department? So you get really specific to get better specific feedback.
Thank you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, if there are no more questions on section 1 at this time, we can go right into section 2.
All right. So we have just talked quite a bit about interview basics that are applicable in any scenario. And so what we want to do now is build on that with that as a foundation to talk specifically about the virtual interview space and even more specifically about during COVID. We have been through a year and we are feeling it, and it is manifesting online as well. Virtual interviewing has been a part of the interviewing process for quite a while, and in fact has been employed usually earlier on at a screening point. It's easier to connect people, and then the subsequent rounds and the selection rounds were in person. And right now, in most industries and circumstances, virtual interviewing is the entirety of the process. So as you may be embarking on those, we want to talk through some of that. So benefits of this virtual space, I don't think any of this is surprising. It's easier to schedule things because you have less time built in around them that you need to take. It's easier to connect people from different locations. And so that is true, as we just started talking about, with multiple interviewers who might need to meet you. And so it's easier to just connect people and get online and have a conversation. This also means that you can maximize your prep time because you are not commuting to a location and worrying about how early you're going to get there and whether your car or transportation is reliable and all of that fun stuff. You can really maximize the time spent prepping and then meeting with people. And as a result, on the whole, we are finding that interview processes, even though they are more in depth right now because they really are spending time to try to get to know you, it's actually moving much quicker. I can't tell you how many candidates that I've met with who've interviewed over the last year, and they said, I was shocked how quickly that went. You know, it was 4 rounds of interviews, but it went like that, and they came back with an offer or a decision, because sometimes the decision isn't in our favor, really quickly. So just be prepared for that kind of sped up process. Challenges, we have a lot of them. Here are a few challenges of the virtual space. So first of all, our schedules have become packed, especially if you are working currently and working remotely. It's easier to just schedule a bunch of stuff in. So we have our packed schedules. We're doing this in isolation. Even if we're connected digitally with our teams, we really are operating on our day primarily on our own. And so all of the planning and brainstorming and detail work that we used to have people around us to check in with, we are doing that all of ourselves. And so I'm calling that executive function overload. We just have, on top of all of our big picture planning, so much more little planning to do. And that's really overloading our brains. And it's taking a physical toll, which we'll talk about a little bit more. But if you are sitting in a chair all day, every day, looking at the same angle at your camera, looking at your screen with your eyes all day, there's a lot of physical toll that can come into this. So what we're experiencing, and you may be familiar with the term Zoom fatigue, but of course this happens on any platform you're using. We've got eye strain, we've got eyes blurring over. maybe very much at this point in the presentation if you've had to look at your screen for the whole time. Our muscles are stiff or sore. Our energy is down. We are operating under crisis conditions. And so we are pulling from a resource, like an emotional and mental resource pool that is already lower. And we have more demands on us in many ways with all of these executive functioning pieces. So our energy reserves are down and draining faster, and it's much harder to focus. And so when we start talking about how to manage your way through a virtual interview, a lot of these things are designed to meet, you know, standard protocols and make sure that you are presenting yourself professionally, but they're also designed to help you kind of protect yourself and protect your energy and bring your best self to that interview. It's also worth noting here that interviewers are experiencing the exact same thing. They are doing their jobs and they're also interviewing people, or that may be the extent of their jobs. They're on Zoom all day. They're looking at their computers all day. They're going through the same thing. So helping them feel comfortable talking to you in this space is going to be more vital than ever. Okay, so there's two kinds of virtual interviews. We are focused today on live interviews, and that is the most common format of an interview where you are on live with at least one interviewer, maybe a panel of interviewers. There are also pre-recorded interviews. We're not going to touch very deeply on that today, but I want you to be aware that it exists. Sometimes as part of the application process or an early interview process, you may be asked to record a short video of yourself where you're answering one or two introductory questions, or you're delivering your elevator pitch, or just kind of a video recorded introduction to yourself. There also is a style of pre-recorded interview where you log on to a website and a virtual pre-recorded person asks you questions, and then you have a chance to record your answers. And so you are doing an in-depth interview, but you're not talking to anybody live. You're pre-recording those answers to be reviewed later. Most of the wisdom we'll talk about today is applicable there. There are a few more tips and tools you'll want. So if that comes up, be aware that you want to do a little more research around it. But today we are talking about the most common experience, which is this live interview. So building on the preparation that you would normally do that Jeanne reviewed, we are going to talk about preparing a number of things today. This is sort of the agenda of preparation. And as you can see, there's already a lot to do. One of the things about interviewing online is that in theory, this should be easier because the idea is you can just kind of jump on your computer and talk to somebody, but there are so many little logistics that we are not used to prepping at this point because it's not our normal operating, behavior. So there's a lot to prepare. When you are confirming details for a virtual interview, there's a few things that are the same. You're going to obviously make sure you have the right date and time. Length and format are very important for you to clarify. In my ideal scenario, someone has sent you the full details of your interview ahead of time, and that includes when you're starting, who you'll be meeting with, and when you're stopping. But I have had some really fun experiences with friends and students and clients where they were given a start time. So we're going to log on here at 3 o'clock, and they were not actually notified how long this interview would last. And I did have a very close friend find herself in a 3-hour interview back to back with several people, sort of taken by surprise. So double check, confirm all those logistics. When are we starting? How long is it? Is it a single round or is it multiple rounds? I'm finding that these are not details that most hiring managers, maybe HR folks who are kind of working around policies, but people who are just in a hiring capacity are not used to confirming all these kinds of virtual details, and they leave things out. It's not necessarily on purpose, but it is on you to make sure. It's also perfectly fair, by the way, if they say, we're going to have 3 hours, you're going to meet with this person for an hour, this person for an hour, this person for an hour, to upfront request a couple of breaks in the middle. Again, it's easy to assume that we're just in our homes captive on our cameras, but we all need to use the bathroom and hydrate too. So requesting a couple of breaks, and I would do that upfront if you possibly can, but it's also fine to just gently in the middle say, do you think we could have 5 minutes between here? And then you need a link to wherever you're going to log on. And from that link or from a confirmation email, you should be able to sort of intuit which platform you're going to use. I think we all know that when we get a Zoom link like this, you'll see zoom.us built right into the source link. So you can use that to figure out what platform you're using. If it's unclear, you could always ask for confirmation of that, because that will matter to you when you log on. So platforms we're using. Zoom is by far the most common platform to be using for all virtual meetings and interviews. I've also seen Google Meet, I've seen Microsoft Teams, and I have seen either a proprietary software, especially for interviews at tech companies, let's say, or some companies will buy a third-party product and kind of integrate it into their own company's website. So sometimes you might log on and then you'll find yourself just using a platform you're unfamiliar with. But I would say most of the time you're going to find yourself on Zoom. When you are thinking about how to use this platform, if you can at all get to know it before you go into the interview, you should. So if you are a Zoom user extraordinaire at this point and you're on a Zoom interview, great. But if you've been using Zoom this whole time and someone invites you to a Google Meet, and that's something you haven't done before, do your best to investigate that platform. A lot of these are free and you can create an account and just log in and mess around, maybe get on a meeting with a friend or a colleague. All of them have the same 5 basic capabilities and maybe others, you know, depending on the program. But for all of them, you're going to have an audio option, a video option, a chat, a screen share function, and probably some kind of file sharing. And you may find yourself, you definitely are going to use audio and video the whole time. You may find yourself wanting to use the other features as well. And being able to do that smoothly and not waste time in the interview will be really important. So try to get on that program and mess around with the interface. One of the things Jeanne touched on in the beginning portion of our presentation was documents that you may want to share. That could include, just a quick recap, a resume and or a cover letter, anything that you submitted as part of the application. Generally speaking, people who are leading interviews will share that with any other members of the interview team, but every now and then someone shows up and doesn't have it. You may be asked to provide that. The interviewer, the lead interviewer, probably will take care of it, but you might be asked to provide it. You might be asked to provide references, and you may decide that you want some portfolio pieces. Maybe they're marketing pieces, maybe it's a presentation you designed, depending on the position. In this environment, you have a few options depending on how you would like to share and how you might be asked to share. So the obvious default is email. You might be asked to say email your resume over again if that's something that they need. The chat function is usually, at least in Zoom, the chat function is where you will find file sharing. So if you were to open the chat function right now, you should see a little button at the bottom right that says file, where you could upload and they could then download. That is a function to use if time is of the essence. If you don't want your interviewer to go hunting through their email and you want them to just have something at their fingertips, that's another option. The last option we have is screen sharing, which I think we're all familiar with. This is the thing I would default to if you were sharing a portfolio piece. That is one of the ways that you protect your own intellectual property and you don't email them a whole bunch of files. It's also a quick way to just demonstrate something, and you can demonstrate your knowledge of screen sharing as well. So depending on what you're doing and what you're sharing, you may have some different options. And again, you just want to be comfortable with all of them. Okay, so based on all of that, we're going to choose the device, the hardware that we're going to use to have our interview. In this day and age, I am guessing that things you might have at your disposal include a desktop, a laptop, and at least one mobile device. I know a lot of us have a phone and a tablet, let's say. So things you want to consider. Number one, how are you going to share files? If you are going into this interview expecting at any way, anticipating at all, to do some screen sharing or some file sharing, you might want to default to a desktop or a laptop. It is significantly easier to do those things from an actual computer. Consider your camera. So a lot of us have, cameras built into a monitor or a laptop. A lot of us have external cameras that we feel comfortable with. In most cases, our devices have the best cameras at this point. And so just using that combination of things to decide what you want to use for the interview. If you do decide to use a mobile device and you think you might need to email something, just have something else nearby, like bring your laptop over to wherever you're going to interview, or bring your tablet over, because you may need to grab it quickly and do some emailing. And then depending on what you're using, let's make sure it doesn't die on you in the middle of the interview. So laptop batteries at this point are still pretty quick to drain. So if you're on a laptop, I would say plug that in for the duration. And no matter what you're using, make sure it's fully charged. That feels like a tiny reminder, but I've had experiences. I think we've all probably been there. And then turn off notifications. So just like an in-person interview, you're going to turn off that phone, or at least the ringer, silence it. But when we are on our computers, we have a bunch of other notifications that might be things that bother us during the interview. If you use any Microsoft products, for instance, if you're using Outlook or Teams and you have it set to ping you every time someone sends you an email or a message, any other messaging platforms that might pop up, at a minimum, those are going to distract you if you are in the middle of an interview. At a maximum, if you have shared your screen and you have shared your entire screen, which I don't recommend, but sometimes we do, those notifications are going to pop up for your interviewers and show them all of your private information. So whatever you're using, just make sure you know how to turn off those notifications before you jump in. Okay, preparing our physical space. So there's a lot to cover here. First of all, we are looking for a relatively neutral environment. Those of you who do have cameras on, I would say you're doing great. We're looking for not a fully blank wall. It doesn't have to be absolutely devoid of personality, but we don't want too many things that could be distracting, controversial, very personal. One really simple example is if you're sitting and you've got a bookshelf in that room and it's way behind you, that's a lovely thing to display. If it's right up behind your camera and that interviewer might distract themselves reading the titles of your books, that's a different story, right? So we're looking for something relatively decluttered and neutral. If you would prefer to use a virtual background and your device supports it and you are comfortable with that, that's also perfectly acceptable. Jeanne and I are giving you two different scenarios today because this is my virtual background, the virtual office I've been in for a year that I would love to have in real life if I had a green thumb and I did not have cats who would dig up my plants. So either is fine. Just make sure that in either scenario, you're looking at things like your lighting. Lighting is really, really tough. For a professional look, you want to be lit from the front and not the back, or at least a balance of both. Natural lighting is your best bet for how you look, but I also know that our window placement isn't always optimal, so artificial light is perfectly fine. And then figure out your sound. So make sure your audio input is great, but also take a look at your audio output. So my computer, for instance, has very weak speakers. So I've got a Bluetooth speaker I had to hook up to hear anybody say anything. So just mess with all of that ahead of time. The name of the game during COVID is minimal interruption. Before COVID, when we were interviewing in a virtual space, the name of the game was no interruption. There was very little tolerance for things like pets, children, roommates, spouses, noise coming in the window. The idea being that when we have more autonomy, we have more options to make sure that those are kind of taken care of. During COVID, employers are telling us across the board that they are giving quite a bit of grace to these interruptions and these technical glitches and all these things that can come up. So if you do have something like that, don't worry about it. It's not going to break the interview. It's going to be about you minimizing those opportunities for them to happen, recovering quickly, and not wasting too much time and moving on. But I have not met with an employer over the last year who has said anything to the contrary. Everyone is aware that this is happening. Okay, some notes on our look. All of the advice holds, but a couple things are different when you are going into a virtual interview. When you are building your outfit, prioritize your headshot. I think we're all very familiar with this head to shoulders look that is on camera whenever you're there. So build your neckline, your coloring, all of that around your head and shoulders rather than the full outfit. By which I mean select it, not to wear it. Check your face in the camera. We look very different on camera and in different lightings and different times of day than we do in person. I find myself, for instance, doing much more dramatic eye makeup for the camera than I would in person, just to define my eyes and not have them swallowed up by my face in my virtual background and lighting situation. So check your face in the camera. But we're also going to complete the outfit. So once you've figured out your head and shoulders and your jewelry from the neck up, complete the outfit for a few reasons. The first one is the same wisdom as like a phone interview. You feel different. You feel more professional, more powerful, more confident when you are fully dressed for business. And that comes through in how you sound and how you look when people are talking to you. Second, I don't know if anybody remembers, and this was actually pre-COVID, but there was an interview on the BBC that went viral with a gentleman who was doing a news interview and his children ran in the background. And then his wife came crashing in behind and had to wrangle everybody. And he just kind of sat there stone-faced trying to make it through. And what we found out after the fact is that the reason he didn't just jump up and help corral his children out of the room is that he was not wearing pants. So we may find ourselves needing to stand up, right? Needing to deal with a situation. And the last thing you want anyone to know is that you are in pajama bottoms or less. So we're going to wear a full outfit. And I would suggest you even consider business shoes. There's no real reason to in terms of you needing to move around your space. But again, your posture, your behavior, the way you come across when you have business shoes on as opposed to slippers, which is my daily reality, or bare feet, is very different. So consider wearing a comfortable business shoe along there. I think I'd like to pause there just briefly and see if any questions have come up in the chat before I dive into some more of this.
I received a question from someone, and it maybe is something that could wait for the end, but I'll just pass it on to you now, and you can decide. So in terms of online interviewing, are you seeing a trend where online interviewing is more common for online jobs or remote positions or in-person positions? Is there really a difference? And someday when we supposedly return to normal, if online interviewing is still available, do you think there will be a correlation between online interviewing and remote work?
Good questions. I do not believe that there is a difference in terms of online interviewing being more prevalent for online jobs. It is right now, it is being used industry-wide for all kinds of positions. There are very, very few types of positions that are bringing people in person. And even when they do, it's really at the end. They're trying to rely as much as they possibly can to keep people safe on this virtual platform. Sometimes for certain industries, they may feel that they need somebody to come in person, and they might do that towards the very end. But right now, there's no difference. Going forward, I fully feel that virtual interviewing will become a more permanent, more default part of the interview space. I do still think that people will be more likely to bring you in person further along. I don't think that when we're back to normal or a new normal, that decisions will be fully made using virtual interviews. But I believe that maybe rounds 1 or 2, those early screening opportunities will be done online. I think like masks, this is going to become a permanent part of our reality in some way. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll keep going. Okay, so we've hit the day of the interview. A few things to consider doing. First one is I like to take a test run, and I do this, if you can, hours before your interview. And that means literally click on the link that you were sent. So they will send you a link directly to the interview meeting. I would click that link and make sure the day of that takes you where you want to go. It may not actually drop you into the meeting, as you may experience on Zoom. When you click into a meeting that hasn't started yet, you get a window that says waiting for the host to start the meeting. But you can feel confident in that moment that you've landed in the right place. So just click on it, make sure you're landing where you need to land so that you can reach out to your interviewer with enough time if you need them to send you a new link. We're also going to double check your surroundings in the day of. You never know what has moved or changed. So just get online, open your camera, make sure that your background still looks neutral and acceptable. If you, like me, experience every day or every other day some kind of freezing or lagging in your video meetings, I would suggest that you consider rebooting your Wi-Fi a good 15 or 20 minutes before, if that's a comfortable process for you. I find that when I start to freeze and lag, I need to reboot anyway, and I would rather kind of clear the traffic out of my Wi-Fi that my house has been giving it before that interview rather than have to leave and come back or deal with that. So consider doing that. If, however, your Wi-Fi is beautiful and never gives you a problem, I would say if it's not broken, don't fix it. Like don't mess with a good thing. So just something to consider. If you, again, have any portfolio pieces or application pieces that you think you may want to share, my strong suggestion is to assemble all of those in one folder that is easily accessible to you. The last thing you want is for you to offer, could I show you something, or your interviewer to say, could you send me a copy of your resume? And you say, sure, I just need to go hunting for it and I can't find it. So we're going to put everything at our fingertips. And then coming back to Zoom fatigue, take a break. Before you get back online, if you can at all build it into your day, give yourself 20 or 30 minutes where you are not sitting in that same chair, looking at that exact screen, hold your body in a different position, give yourself a physical break so that you can come back refreshed to the interview. Okay, so during the interview, I suggest you log on about 10 minutes early. There is a small chance that interviewers, if they have packed in several interviews back to back, they have given out the same link to everybody and they're staying in one room. So you will probably be held in a waiting room, or if that's not the case and it's just your interview, you'll wait for someone to show up. But I would log on 10 minutes early and be there when they are ready for you. Oop, hang on. Okay. The new eye contact in this virtual space is a very awkward thing to make. Depending on the platform you're using, as you probably know, when you actually look at someone's face on your screen, it does not look like you are looking at them. And in fact, if you are used to platforms like Microsoft Teams or FaceTime or Skype, if anyone's still there, you're used to the other person's video being way in the bottom of your screen. And you want to look at their face because you want to know how engaged they are with you. You want to see if they're drifting off, how this is going. But if you look at their face down at the bottom of your screen, this kind of situation does not look like you are actually making eye contact, and it's very off-putting. So I'm not suggesting that you stare down the lens of your camera, but periodically take a moment to either look towards the top of your screen or right directly into the camera lens, just periodically, so that people feel like you are making eye contact. It's an awkward thing to learn how to do. You may be well versed in it at this point, but just keep it in mind when you're online. One of the things I do, this is a really specific technical recommendation. One of the things I do when I'm on Zoom and there's a screen share situation or a speaker situation is I try to put any floating windows at the top of my screen rather than let them sit on the side, so that when I'm looking, I'm actually looking at all of you now at the top of my screen, and it looks like I'm making eye contact. However it works for you, just play around with the platform and get comfortable with that. So when things inevitably go wrong, because they often do, if you are interrupted, if you do freeze or lag, if you do get booted out of the meeting, if, like has happened to me at least 3 times this year, the entire block's power goes out in the middle of your interview, how you recover is going to be the most important thing to the interviewer. Again, they are not under any delusions that we are going to be perfectly interruption free, but your ability to make suggestions, figure out a way to recover from it, move on gracefully. This is where your humor is really going to come into, maybe crack a joke about it, is a huge thing, because as we talked about in the beginning of this presentation, one of those soft skills that everyone's looking for is adaptability, is flexibility, is recovery. And you have, if you have any setbacks during the interview, an amazing opportunity to demonstrate in real time what it looks like for you when a crisis hits. So you can prep as much as you can, but something may inevitably happen, and your ability to just move on from it gracefully is all that they're looking for. Okay, how we're engaging people online. Your body language is currently your shoulders up. This is a very difficult situation we are put in because we can't see each other's full body language. I have a sense of like who might be leaning in, who might be leaning back, you know, but it's very difficult to really express yourself. One of the things that fatigues us or causes us physical pain is the fact that we have to be on a lot more. We have to engage our face a lot more frequently. We have to smile a lot more and nod when people say things. We have to really physically perform attentiveness and engagement and excitement way over the top, more than we would in person, because people can't see us. So think about how you're doing that. You don't have to feel like you are, you know, shaking constantly or gesturing wildly, but you do want to employ a little bit more of that upper body and those facial expressions more than you might normally, especially in reacting to people as they talk. Like active listening and nodding and smiling when they say things is going to be really important. We're going to use humor. We've mentioned that several times. Use humor to both recover from hiccups and also to just, you know, engage them. They're tired too. They have seen a million people too. And if you are the person that made them laugh, they're going to remember you. And my last note about being in the interview live is there are interactive tools on all of these platforms that we don't always have at our disposal in person. And employers are telling us that if you find a reason, a desire to use them organically, they have to kind of naturally fit into the conversation. And appropriately, they have to actually make sense, that you're welcome to do that. So if you find the vibe is really good in the conversation and you'd like to maybe use a poll, or you would like to share your screen, or you might want to use that whiteboard function, especially as library professionals who are working on educating, engaging people in this environment. If you have tools that you have used that you can quickly and appropriately and organically incorporate, employers are telling us that they welcome that. Something to really think about and maybe process with somebody how you want to do that, but it's certainly a welcome thing to do. And it's an opportunity to demonstrate our tech savvy and how we are engaging people in this environment in real time. Okay, so after the interview, as with any interview, we're following up, and I will just reiterate that in this environment, follow up by email is the most important. Snail mail may not reach somebody at all or in time for their process, because as I mentioned, we're going faster. So by the time you send somebody a letter or a handwritten note, which is often welcome, they may have already moved on to the next round. So you want to make sure you've got an email in there. Get it in quickly. If you can get it in that day or the next day, that's the best opportunity, best choice. And just, you know, try to personalize it like anytime you would. And just for you, again, to keep yourself refreshed and engaged, turn back on your notifications, because we sometimes forget that we've turned them off and people are looking for us. And put your slippers back on, relax. Honestly, build in some time, if you at all can, to take a break for your mental, emotional, physical energy. This stuff requires so much from you that we don't always notice because we're just sitting in our house. But it takes a lot out of you. So give yourself whatever you need to kind of relax and take a deep breath and process that. Okay, questions that may have come up about this, about anything that Jeanne or I covered today?
Yes, please submit any questions you have to the chat. Somebody did send me a question asking if you would suggest a hotspot, a Wi-Fi or mobile hotspot instead. Any input on that?
As opposed to your own house's Wi-Fi, like connecting to a hotspot?
I think so.
Sure. I would say go with whatever you know to be the strongest signal you have. If you can connect to a hotspot and you know that that will give you better service, absolutely. If you have, like, this depends on how kind of techie you are and how much you want to play around with it. If you have amazing cell service and terrible Wi-Fi, you might want to set up your own hotspot if you can from your phone. If you have, you know, wired internet, that's also an amazing option. If you have access to an office with wired internet, that's an amazing option. So it really just depends on, if you find a hotspot that you feel is a much more reliable connection, absolutely.
I think testing is probably the most important step, just making sure that it's, yeah.
It really, really is. What else can we tell you?
Any other questions? We have a thanks for everything. This was very informative and helpful.
Thanks for being here.
Yes, we are delighted to be here with you. You know, there was a question earlier about, was it about questions? I think you had about the questions that might be asked. I think there was another one about group interviews. We do have a separate presentation where we talk about all of the different types of interviews, group interviews, panel interviews, as well as a section on questions, those sticky, tricky questions. But they're not included in this particular presentation. So just so you know that. There's one thing I want to say, if there's no more questions, if you've tried all of these things that we have presented to you today, all of these different skills, and the ones that Lyn has presented about online training, or online interviewing rather, and you still don't get the job, it doesn't necessarily mean that's the end of the story. I've had many experiences over the 40 years that I have been in the corporate sector, where you might not get a job, or a person might not get the job, but the person that was hired doesn't work out and leaves maybe after 3 months. And the employer is saying, oh boy, you know, after all of this, we've lost this person, or we had to let that person go. They start looking at the people they've interviewed, and you could get a call from that employer saying, can you come back, because this position has now just reopened. Of course, that will raise some questions for you to ask too, but that happens. Or something happened that the person had to leave. Like, you know, their spouse was suddenly transferred to Germany. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So to make sure that you stay in the game while you're looking elsewhere, while you're waiting for that other opportunity to pop up, send another thank you note. Even if you're told, or you find out when you called that somebody else got the position, send another email, and then maybe follow up even with a snail mail, but send that email and say, thank you so much for the opportunity to interview for this position. And while I'm disappointed that I was not the successful candidate, I hope you will keep me in mind in case another position opens up at your organization, because I am very, very interested in working for your organization. That will put you right in the running again, because how many people do you think actually do that? Not many. So that will give you a competitive edge. And so if that position reopens or another position opens up, you may very well be number 1 or number 2 on the list to be contacted. So never give up and never say that this is the end. And of course, that's another reason why you never burn your bridges. You always are gracious about even a rejection, because you know you're in the library business, which is associated with the publishing industry, and we know how many times brilliant authors have submitted manuscripts that have been rejected by publishers. So you could be the best in the world and you might just miss out on that job, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to get the next best thing or the next big thing coming along. So always stay in the game.
Thank you. We have a tangential question to all of that. So sending these follow-up letters, is it okay to send the follow-up letter as both an email and a handwritten note card? Is the handwritten card expected in this day and age?
Well, yes, it is, because you know anything that isn't normal or usual, as long as it's positive, is a nice surprise, and it makes you stand out. You want to stand out in a good way. So after the interview, you want to send the email, because that's fast and things move fast, and you want to stay in that game to see if you can get the job. But if you don't get the job, then the timing is all different, and it's your choice. You can either send an email, or if you want to send a handwritten note saying, you know, thank you so much, but I hope you keep me in mind. That's fine too, because the timing is different then. But send it quickly, you know, even if it's a snail mail, send it quickly. Or you can send a little typewritten note if you have some nice professional stationery. But the idea is get that thank you note in, however you're going to send it, even if you don't get the job.
Yeah, I think the most important thing when you are sending, I agree with all of that. I think the most important thing when you're sending multiple notes. Now, multiple notes can mean an email and then a handwritten note to the same person, or it can mean you had a panel of interviewers or multiple interviewers in a day and you're sending an individual note to each of those people. The most important thing is that it not say the same exact thing verbatim. Right. You want to make sure that every single thing you're sending is a genuine expression of interest and thanks. So if you send a note and you're reiterating something about the conversation that you really enjoyed, say something new in that handwritten note.
You know, the other thing is, I remember a young man who interviewed with my company many years ago, and I was one of the interviewers, and he didn't get the job. But he kept sending us little notes. And what he would do is, that was the days before we were so much online. You know, we were online, but not like we are today. So you would send somebody a clipping, you know, a news clipping. So he would do those little things. He would, every once in a while, if there was an article in the paper about our company, he would clip it out and he'd make a note on it and he'd send a little, you know, note of what he's doing, keeping up. You know, he eventually did get hired with our company. It wasn't for a couple of years, but he was young, but he was determined. And I bet he did this with other companies too. And it wasn't intrusive or anything. It was just, you know, every once in a while, somebody would get, and he'd say, oh, guess what? We got a little note from, you know, Joe again, you know, but it worked eventually. So just do it tastefully and don't be too intrusive. And it's a very good tool to use. It's very impressive to employers. Anything else that we can answer for you today on this topic?
I think we got one last thing here. So if you interview with multiple interviewers and you only have the email address for maybe the primary interviewer, can you request that they send along the message? Do you request the email addresses from them? Is it overstepping bounds if you go and find the email addresses maybe on the public site?
Lynn, do you have an opinion on that?
So this is going to depend so much on how the interview ends up running. If it's, for instance, if you are interviewing with 4 people who are all directly in the department where you might work, they're really directly involved in what you're doing, and you really had different questions from them and different things that you took away from them, you might decide that you want to write an individual note to them. The best option is to ask for their contact information up front. So as you are leaving the interview, would you mind sharing your emails with me? I'd love to follow up with you. But if you don't get an opportunity to do that, if it's public information on the website and you're confident those are the people, I don't think there's any issue with just grabbing their emails off of the site. It's perfectly appropriate to send a thank you note to your primary interviewer, and in that email say, would it be possible to get the contact information for these people by name or the rest of the interview committee? I would really love to reach out to them personally. That's the best option. That's the most appropriate. The other thing you can do, if it feels appropriate to you in the moment, is say, please also extend my thanks to the entire committee with a slightly different paragraph kind of message directly to them. So I really appreciated our time together and I learned X. Please also extend my thanks to the committee. I loved being able to hear from them all about X, Y, and Z, so that when they forward that note, there's something there for them. That's a very complicated answer to a very simple question.
But that's good, because in my experience, when we have interviewed people, I had multiple of us have interviewed one candidate. The candidate, one candidate sent an email to the primary interviewer, but he said, dear, and mentioned all of our names. And that person, who was our boss, just forwarded that email to all of us and said, hey, we got this really nice note from, you know, Kendra. Another thing is what Lynn just said, that oftentimes you'll just send it to the primary rather than, you know, sometimes it's a little bit uncomfortable if you get an email from somebody you have not invited to email you or given your business card to. So what Lynn said was perfectly fine. Please pass on my thanks also to, and then you name the people that interviewed you, and then they would just circulate. This is even with snail mail notes. You would always put a little memo on top of it, and you would circulate it throughout the the department to everybody who was concerned. So this is perfectly fine.
Okay, I think that's just about every question that we had here.
Okay.
And so I think we'll do some wrap up messages here. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you both so much for all of this information, for fielding all of our questions. We will be sending out a follow-up survey and evaluation of this program after the meeting, along with some continuing ed credits. We just want to remind everyone, oh, thank you. And we just want to remind everyone once more that we have the professional development awards that are available. Please consider checking those out and sending in an application. And we also have the annual conference coming up for WLA on May 7th. So please save the date. We'll be sending out more information about that. And Lyn has said in the chat that they'll share contact information. So perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. And I think with that, Megan, do you have any other comments?
No, thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was really, really good.
Oh,
thank you.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Yao.
For your time. Yes.
We do have a little bit more information. I think Lyn has a slide.
Oh,
there.
Sure.
All right, these are our websites, which you're invited to visit for more information. I have done a blog. I have published a blog since 2012. There are hundreds and hundreds of blog posts on business etiquette, and there is a whole entire section archived on interviewing, all different kinds of interviewing. So you are welcome to go there and browse through all of those posts to see if you can find any other information, and you can certainly email me through my website. And I think Lyn too, right?
Absolutely. I have coaching services available if and free consultations if anyone wants to dive in more.